Okay, this is module 2 on understanding culture and its importance. Really excited about this. Um, Let me ask you guys before I get started. Do you want me to do two separate lectures on the two separate parts of the chapter? Like 2.1 and 2.2, two separate ones, two separate videos? Because I can. Okay, so we'll do the first part and then I'll stop the recording and then re-record the second part. Okay, cool. All right, so we'll do this in two parts, and I think that's fantastic because it's smaller and then you can go back to it in more mindful ways. Good. I appreciate that. Okay, so let me share the screen, and I'm going to do it in an advanced way so we can you don't have to see everything. There we go. All right. So I think this is the good part, and then I could put my controls elsewhere. Can you guys see me on the screen or no? I can't see any heads wagging, so can you give me a verbal yes or no?
I see it.
Okay, good. Because I can't see me on the screen right now. So I just want to make sure that you can. Is it covering any of the words or anything? Can you see all the words? Okay, good. All right. All right, good. So let's talk about culture and socialization. So as a review, we learned about socialization in the first module, that socialization is this life learned process, this lifelong process. You don't wake up one day and say, I'm done with my socialization, because there's something new to learn all the time. I mean, if there's new technology, we all have to be socialized to it or not. We can, sidestep it and choose not to be a part of that new technology. You guys may have been hearing about AI and ChatGPT. Some people are just going to ignore that forever, and some people are already on top of it. So, again, we can even talk later about how the AI is even culturally saturated, meaning the AI is based on what it does is it looks over the entire internet and it starts to pull information from the entire internet. Well, if the internet was already written by somebody who holds a bias, guess what? That AI just pulled all the bias. So programmers have bias. Anyone who writes content creators have bias. So there's this piece of like, now if our AI is generating what's already pulling from what's already out there, then there's bias in there. Could be straightforward racist. We don't, we just have to be aware. I tell, people back in the 60s and 70s, they would say, question everything, and it's true to question everything. So there's this piece where culture and socialization happens over a lifetime, but we do have to adjust when new information comes out or not. So this first part about defining culture, I really like how the authors included these pictures. And again, thank you to Dr. Valdez for doing the setup and sharing this fantastic, very detailed way of presenting the class. I really appreciate that. So again, with culture, there's so many factors that go in. The basic term is that represents the practices of a group or a culture, a large group of people. So we can say the American culture, and that can mean so many different things. But for the most part, we share value of life, value of success. Technically, Americans value money, value technology, value winning, individualism, that kind of thing. So for the dominant, you could say inside, maybe I don't believe all those things, but the dominant culture, for the most part, believes those things. And so, so all of these different parts go into a culture, right? And then we'll look at it a little bit more detailed here. But so I'm going to ask the class here these critical reflection questions because we are here in a lecture, and I do have a few people, and I'm hoping I can get at least one or two people to pop in on the critical reflections here. Think about the setting and environment of grocery stores in each culture. Now, has everybody been to a grocery store in a different culture? My son loves H Mart, loves H Mart, loves H Mart. And I'll go in there too, and he can tell me so much more about the things that are in H Mart than I can. And he likes certain types of ramen. He doesn't eat fish, but he'll eat certain sushi and blah, blah, blah. Like, so what do you think about grocery stores in different cultures? I mean, let's say H Mart versus, let's say, what's a really fancy American one? Pavilions or Whole Foods. Holy cow. Oh. Or what about like a local bodega, tienda, superior, la canasta, things like that? How are they different? Have you guys noticed that at all? You can chat it out. You can put it in, type it out. You can say it out loud. I got to get at least one feedback before I go forward.
What was the question?
So this right here, this critical reflection, think about the setting environment at grocery stores in different cultures. Will these differences change the way one interacts with each other? So have you ever been into different types of grocery stores, Yuri?
I did.
Okay, cool. How are they different?
How are they different?
Yeah, how are they different?
Because like in Asian markets, they usually have lots of Korean food
Mm-hmm.
and probably some grocery stores that are not Asian, they have a lot of American food.
Of course, of course. I did notice in H Mart there is still a lot of American brands, but there's a whole section of like different noodle bowls and utensils and things like that that you wouldn't find in, let's say, an Albertsons or something like that. So I have chat here. Let me pull this other. So I see one in the chat here says shopping at Northgate is geared towards Latin American people, the decorations and music. There you go. Absolutely. So I live in Santa Ana. We have like an Albertsons and like a Superior on the same street, so like 4 blocks away, two, maybe two. And yeah, completely different. The music's different. The layout's a little bit different. And like, think about even in these two pictures here, we have a self-service here, and then we have this open market that looks maybe somewhere in the Middle East. This looks like Farsi, some sort of, right? So different cultures will show up, especially in grocery stores. Now, a big store like Vaughn's or Albertsons, oh, I miss Vaughn's. Albertsons, they have like little sections that'll say Hispanic, right? Or Asian, like, but in other stores, that's the whole store. So, what about the checkout lines? What do you guys think about self-checkout?
I don't like self-checkout at all. I'm like, they're no, it's just wrong.
I know it just okay. So yeah, my belief is I thought the products wrap in the price of what it pays to pay their employees, right? So
Wait,
if
self-checkout is like when a cashier helps you or you do it on your
you
own?
do it on your own,
That's kind of hard, I know.
yeah, so first of all, there's a joke with me and my friends. Every time I go through self-checkout, even if it's like for one thing, there's a problem. So there's that. So I'm like, I always tell people, I'm not. They go, you can go to self-checkout. I'm like, trust me, I'm gonna end up calling you or your manager over here at some point. Like, just open up the cash register. Trust me, it's just gonna
Because
be
like
easy.
whenever I do self-checkout with my family, like mostly says we have to see an attendant to help.
Yes. So then why don't we just
So
rely
yeah,
on
it
the
kind
attendant?
of frustrated us out.
Right, but then there are other people who love it because they don't want to interact with an attendant, right? And
Mhm.
so, and then I know big stores like Walmart have a lot of self-help checkout now, and people, what they do is they don't beep it and they just put it in their cart. So then they reported this big loss statement. It's like, well, maybe. So the bottom line with capitalism, so American culture is built around capitalism, which is basically the smallest amount of investment for the biggest return, right? So if we could sell air that we could bottle up like this that costs nothing and make uh $10 on a bottle of air, people would do that. And people can, you can go to air bars. So what I'm saying is that the self-checkout is supposed to make more money for the store. And so in capitalism, we would say, yay, America loves capitalism. So let's support making more money for the store. But wait a minute, then that's less money than I have. So capitalism really culturally supports large businesses. And us, the people, are the people that support the capitalism. It's really kind of an interesting concept. And by the way, every ism has its inherent downfall. So racism and sexism and capitalism, even socialism, everything has a little hole in the theory because they're just theories. And so again, now we're seeing a lot of people are saying with the grocery prices that have gone up, gas prices that have gone up, inflation, all this stuff, the American people, even though we live under a capitalistic model, are saying, nope, we're not doing that anymore. Or we're fighting back, we're pushing back on certain things, like even like self-checkout lines. I remember when like McDonald's or Taco Bell used to have the screen where you could order. Yeah, no, skip that. That for me, I skipped that. And then they took them all out. Because why? Because it was too challenging, or it was too confusing, or it took too long, or right kind of situation. So where the company's trying to save a buck, it's not working. And so then they take it out. And we could have told you that. So yes, different grocery stores show the local culture. We're not going to have a grocery store like this in the middle of your Belinda. That's not going to happen. This, sure. Yeah. This, not so much, right? And I really like when I try to define culture for people, that culture is learned. You are not born with culture. You are not born with culture. Okay. So again, I don't read every line for you. I want to make sure that you guys are doing the reading, but I want to kind of back up what is in the reading. And so think about it this way. I have a great example. My son was born in San Bernardino, at like a local St. Jude's hospital type hospital, and St. Bernardine, so very old hospital, very old neighborhood. He was born to a family that had like mixed siblings, so like one brother and then like two half brothers, and then like a former husband, whatever. And so born to a family. I think the husband was primarily Spanish speaking, but his mom was not. So there was a little bit mixed cultures in there, but at the same time, she was partially Hispanic, so you can have a lot of shared overlap there. But what he would have learned, we can only guess as his culture. Like his culture may have been more around traditional, like Mexican holidays, or traditional events, or meetings, or parties, or anything like that. So that culture was kind of set around him, right? He just needed to get in there and learn it. However, he was adopted, so he came into my culture. Now, I can't give him the culture that he had, because I only have the culture that I have, right? So so when he turned 16 last week, he said, "Do I get a quinceañera?" And I said, "First of all, that's 15. And secondly, that's typically for girls." Right? And he's like, "Oh, okay." So he wanted to pull from his Mexican culture, but I was like, "But wait a minute, you're raised white." He has an Xbox, he's got like a Switch, he's got guitars, he's got keyboards, he's got a dog, he's got mountain bikes, he's got skateboards. Like he is like raised like a white kid, because how do I raise a kid otherwise than what I have? Right. But as we grow together, as I keep being socialized as a parent, he keeps being socialized as a teenager. And then our culture is now us together. So for example, I say our culture is multicultural. So like some of our family are Jewish, and so we do celebrate, like we pair up with some of our families and celebrate Hanukkah, just very slightly. And then he does belong to a mentoring group for 100 Black men of Orange County, which is super awesome. So we did Kwanzaa, he did like Black History Month. He's done a lot of cool stuff with them. And then super white. I'm like, let's go to the farmers market, and let's go geocaching, and let's go hiking, like way more white activities. But I also incorporated in a drum circle, and then he's got therapy. So it's like these different cultural pieces that he's got. Again, starting his music lessons. That's a whole culture. This whole culture of rock, of all these people who play music all the time. That's just how they live and breathe. And it's like, okay, cool. So we like to dabble in different cultures. We go to like a crystal shop, and there's like little events there. We do like stuff in our community. So like we kind of spend time like in Tustin, Orange, and Santa Ana. So we do like the International Street Fair, but then he also goes to Disneyland with his dad. So he's being raised very white, right? But that's all I have. However, I'm learning Spanish every day, so I'm trying to get him to appreciate the parts of his culture. And does he love birria? Yes. Could he eat tacos every day? Sure could. But he tells me which ones are the good ones and not the good ones. Fantastic. So he learns culture. So your culture could include other cultures, right? So again, we learn what is in our bubble, in our universe, in our we call it like our own ecology. I mean, think about it. I live in Santa Ana, but I work here. This campus is gorgeous. I mean, how many other places can you say I was driving to work and saw people on their horses? No, I mean, unbelievable. Just heading east just a tiny bit, and there's this totally different culture out here. Extremely white. It's almost too white for me. It's wild, right? And now we could talk about, if you looked at all the different cultures, there's cultural universals, meaning what is the same with all cultures? First of all, even if you compare cultures, there's a lot of similarities. Number one, family units, right? The definitions can be different. And then, or things like gender and gender roles. Sometimes they're universal and sometimes they're a little bit different. And then there's cultural icebergs, meaning you'll see just a little bit of the iceberg and then this big piece in the bottom. And I'll show you about the visual. I'll show the video in a second. But like, for example, and I mentioned gender, in the Native American communities, they don't always say that this person, let's say if a certain person is homosexual, they don't normally say this person's homosexual. They say this person is of two spirits, and they don't treat them any different. They don't, it doesn't, there's no challenge there. That's just part of their culture. They accept it. And so there's a lot of universals, but then there's also differences too, which is beautiful. So let's look at cultural icebergs. See if I can make it louder and bigger. And make this bigger. I love the iceberg analogy because it really gets us to understand what we can see is not the whole picture. There we go.
There are many metaphors or analogies for culture. Often culture is referred to as an iceberg. There are only a few things you can sense above the surface of the water. But when you look deeper, there are much more ways that culture influences our experiences in the world. At the surface level, there are things you can observe with your five senses. Music, food, art, greetings, sports. When planning a trip to a foreign country, most of us will start learning about cultures from the things on the tip of the iceberg. For example, what kind of food is there? Or, is it crowded? However, approximately 80% of a culture is below the surface. Here you will find opinions, viewpoints, attitudes, values, and convictions. These inform thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors to leadership styles, adaptability to change, the role of family, and so many more important things.
This is great. I stop it here for a second because it's really interesting. My son and I talked about it last night. He didn't understand the January 6th insurrection. He didn't understand it. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a little bit over a year ago and this and that and this and that. And he's like, well, wait a minute. So people like tried to break into the Capitol. And I was like, yeah, people died and they broke property and they had, plans to hurt people and kidnap people and do some really bad stuff. And, even though our country is founded on things like this, fighting for what people believe in, there are still consequences to their actions. He's like, well, what about freedom of speech? I said, good point. Freedom of speech doesn't mean that you have freedom of consequences. So in our country, we can criticize the government. That is part of the beauty of our country. And trust me, a lot of people like to criticize our government on both sides. And that's just how it is. In other countries, you do that, they disappear you. Like the fact that we can even have this discussion about criticizing the government would be considered like against the law in some countries. Right? And so it's unbelievable that just the American viewpoint. So we all have opinions as a larger culture, but then we have these smaller cultures in our smaller communities, our smaller homes and things like that. But our philosophy of like, this is a free country and we can do pretty much whatever we want with exception. That is a really unique philosophy. A lot of countries don't have that. Right. So, and then same thing, do we value life? Do we not value life? Do we only value certain lives? Right. Some people say, well, these type of people are more important than those type of people. That's bigotry and racism. Some people say our country was founded on bigotry and racism, and maybe yes, maybe no, but that doesn't mean that's how it has to be forever, right? Our convictions are that, education is important, but not everybody has that conviction. So here are views about our leaders, same thing. Not everybody's going to be happy about who's in power, but that's why we have a democratic process of voting, right? Tolerance for change. Some people are really good with change, some people are not. You saw it with COVID. I mean, I think again, that is one shared culture that we all have on our planet. Can you believe that? The culture of quarantine. Now, some people said, quarantine, schmorantine, I don't see it, and I'm not going to wear a mask. I'm not going to get vaccinated. I'm going to do whatever I want. Consequences. There are consequences for that. There are some people who probably got through that without consequences, but most people did not, right? Assumptions about relationships. People like friendships are important, and it's hard to make friends. And, in other countries, people have more friends, they have less friends, or they have a bigger family unit. In America, we have smaller family units. Some of our subcultures have large family units. So it's kind of this in between, but our assumption about relationships are that we can help each other, right? Some other countries believe in more help, and some other countries believe in less help. Attitudes regarding gender and gender expression. Oof, that's a big tinderbox right now, gender and gender expression, that, women should look like this and men should look like this and women should act like this and men should act like that and this and that. It's really interesting that, again, we have all these personal freedoms in our country because our country was born on freedom, but there's a lot of people coming around saying, no, your freedoms are not okay. What's good for the goose is good for the gander, people. You can't have it both ways. So let's continue the video.
When you interact with people from cultures that are different than your own, you might encounter something that challenges your own beliefs, perspectives, and/or values. This can happen when you're interacting with individuals in your own culture, but it is more likely to happen when you're interacting with people from another culture. It's important to understand your own cultural iceberg and look below the surface at some of the deeper cultural layers that you have learned and adopted. The payoff of doing some of this work is that once you know about some of your own cultural traits, then you are presented with the opportunity to choose to respond in the best way possible. For example, if you have learned from your cultural bias that the world is flat, and then you learn that some people think the world is triangular, and that some people see the world as round, you may start to question your beliefs or feel confused or even sometimes defensive. However, by examining your own deeper cultural layers, you will come to understand that there are many possible ways to experience the world and that there isn't one superior viewpoint, just many different points of view.
So one of the biggest challenges. People see how this guy sees 4 sticks and this guy sees 3. They're both correct. And what happens is that in our very like caveman animalistic brain, on the very inside, we want something secure and safe. We want a clean yes, we want a clean no. Is this safe for us? Will this unalive us? Right? And so what happens is that people take these into just arguments. These arguments are not going to unalive you. It's like, so again, most people want a clear yes, a clear no. But truly life is messy, and life is in this, it's not black or white, it's gray. The second people are stuck with black or white, either maybe on religion or politics, or let's say race relations or gender expression. Once you have somebody who's very black or very white on these extremes, that's where the problems are. People can be very dogmatic, very stuck in their mindset on each side. And that's where the arguments are, and that's where the wars start. But life really is this big gray area. And so if more people could understand that we have very narrative or very dialectic, maybe 2 different things can exist at the same time, then we would have less arguments. So it's almost like the agree to disagree. Sometimes that's a good thing to use, and sometimes it's not. But when people say, I don't understand your point of view, but I see that it is your point of view, that is a very great place to work from. Saying like, I don't see it your way, but I see that you see it your way, and we can agree to disagree because we can both be right. That's what agree to disagree means. That's instead of saying like, well, I recognize that you're wrong, so I'll just agree to disagree. No, That's different. When you guys can come to a mutual understanding, that's agree to disagree.
This understanding will lead to being more open to difference and to learning more about different perspectives rather than defending or thinking that one person is right and the other person is wrong. In this way, then, you are better prepared to engage with being a global citizen who can build relationships with all kinds of people.
So I like that last piece about global citizenship. Not every country or culture values that. A lot of cultures are like, well, let's just be our culture and let's just be us and we're going to just be alone and just do our thing. Cool. But since our country was born on individualism and freedoms and we are a melting pot, why all of a sudden are we not a melting pot? It's kind of interesting. But again, so yesterday here on campus, there was the Holi Festival, kind of what we would say Diwali, or like where they throw the chalks and the colors and stuff like that. It was really great. But again, just like this, like it started off with, we really only see a very small part of that culture. So they had some food, they had henna, they had music, they had the chalk. I'm like, well, that's the stuff that we can see. However, what we're not seeing is maybe gender roles, or are there people who are Indian and homosexual, or want to present themselves at an opposite gender? How does it work in that country? How do they do that? What, other things like there's more than one language in India. There's more than one religion in India. There's a lot of poverty, but there's a lot of rich and opulence. So even like the Taj Mahal, if you've seen pictures of the Taj Mahal, it's a beautiful, it was a shrine built to this Maharaja's wife and things like that. Excuse me, I probably said that wrong. But at the same time, if you pan the camera away from the Taj Mahal, you see like a garbage dump, like a mile away. It's really interesting how so every culture to me has that juxtaposition of the haves and haves nots. But again, these invisible, right here, invisible cultural elements, such as emotional reactions and belief systems, we won't always know unless you're there or talk with people, right? So really, really cool. All right, ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. I really like cultural relativism. Relativism on its own means that whatever concept we're talking about is relative to the environment that it exists in. So if I said, I have really big feet, well, okay, sure. Are we in a shoe store? Are we talking about shoes? Great. And is it relative? Maybe I have really big feet in comparison to my siblings who have smaller feet. So I have really big feet. But if I said I wear a size 9.5, yeah, that's big for a woman, but like, people go, no, that's not big. I thought you were saying like you had like a 12 or something like really big, like freakishly big. It's all relative. So I think they're big. Other people are like, no, I wear 9.5. It's not big. It's just a little big. It's not that bad. Right. But I've met women who wear 12s. Right. But all their siblings wore 12s. All their other girl siblings wore 12s. So they didn't have big feet. They just had big feet, but not in their culture. Interesting, right? And then we can talk about what do big feet mean, or what your toes are a different shape. What does that mean, right? It's all relative to what your belief systems are. So again, there's this piece of, look at this. Again, we were just talking about India. They worship cows. Can't touch a cow. I don't know how they put the skirt on the cow. But cows can roam the streets and they're untouched. They could be sleeping in the middle of a 4-lane highway and they're untouched. Oh, isn't that wild? Yeah. So it's very important to them. And I think that's great. If that's what they believe in and that brings calm and clarity and cohesiveness to their culture, go for it. It's fantastic. Right. And so again, right, I like this analogy here. If we go like this, we mean, okay, but in like Italy, it means, right. Same thing. What about like Middle East? I learned in grad school that if I was going to do therapy with somebody, perhaps in the Middle East, if I crossed my legs and showed them the bottom of my foot, that's offensive. If I, for some reason, handed them a pen with my left hand, that's offensive. Because in that culture, you do everything with the right and you wipe with the left. So it's really kind of interesting. And there are no left-hand people because of that. Ugh. And so that's changing a little bit, but there's this piece where we have to be careful about what is okay in our culture, and then we take it somewhere else. And you'll hear this, well, we're Americans and we do it right. says according to who? Right? It's right for us, but it doesn't mean it's right for the world. And so that's when we start getting into that crisscross of people say, what I do is right, and if you don't do it my way, you're wrong. That's ethnocentrism, saying we do it right. Therefore, if you don't do it right, you're doing it wrong. Doesn't mean that it's wrong for them, just means that it's different. And then here's the next step, and this kind of gets ahead of us a little bit. When people say, I'm right and you're wrong, they switch this moral compass and say, I'm good and you're bad. So let's say because you don't put up a Christmas tree, you're a bad person. Wait, what? How did we get there? I put up a Christmas tree and I decorated every year different colors and blah, blah, blah. And whoever doesn't put up a Christmas tree is not Christian, is not American. And if you don't put up a Christmas tree, you're bad. So that's where people start to get this ethnocentric, well, if I'm right and you're wrong, that means I'm good and you're bad. That narrative, that whole story that people tell themselves is very dangerous. And so it's the opposite of saying, oh, people are different and they do it differently their way. Oh, I like this. I like this one. Look how they're all wearing like the same pants and the same shirt. Is it a tradition or is it a certain day of the week? I'm always curious about. The bowls are the same, but they have different decorations, but it looks like all their pants are the same. And I don't know if those are long socks with shorts, or is it pants that have the knees cut out so they can bend like that? I'm always curious about that, and this little collar on them, did they hand make the collar? Was it woven and spun, or did they purchase those from a different city or village or Amazon? This looks like Calpico. This looks like stuff that we could get at home, right? So it looks like they have some bottled convenience things. I'm always interested in that. And then these guys right here are eating that American, looks like pudding or gravy or biscuits or meat, and they have the same haircut. They got a gray shirt on. Today I was driving up the hill and there was these girls by El Medina, and they almost looked identical. It was a beautiful thing. Dark brown hair, long. They all had baggy pants, a t-shirt, a hoodie, and a black backpack. And then like some sort of tennis shoe that was like white. So it was like black, and then their shoes were white. And I was like, interesting. I wonder if white shoes are a status symbol, like keeping them clean. I don't know. But like the baggy shirts and the hoodies, we've had versions of that for years, right? But girls, I mean, think about it. In our culture, girls were expected to wear dresses. My mother-in-law said she went to Disneyland in 1955 when it opened, like in the first few months. You were required to wear a dress and heels. Girls couldn't wear pants. So what is normal at certain times doesn't mean that it's normal at different times. And it's all relative, right? So it's relative to when somebody says, yeah, I have to dress up to go to church. I've been to churches where it's like shorts and flip-flops. Interesting, right? But it's your good flip-flops, right? And again, here's like they talk about cuisine. I'm telling you, my son for Mother's Day said, Mama, let's go to Indian food. And we were the only other than Indian people in there. So I was like, well, then it's probably good if they're all coming here for Mother's Day. And he was wearing a dashiki because he just had a dance. They did a Marvel themed dance and he wanted to go as Wakanda guys. So I got him a dashiki, which looks like a long tunic and pants. And it had like this, decorated thing on there. But his principal is Indian. And she goes, oh, that looks very Indian. So then he was like, oh, if it looks Indian too, let's go to Indian food. So again, our visual concepts of what happens in a culture is different than all the other parts that happen in a culture. So it's really kind of fun because have you ever heard of people saying, I went to a certain country for like a week and then I just didn't realize how different it was? Yeah. Even my sister-in-law for her 40th birthday, she took her kids and her husband, they went to Italy for a month. They rented a villa. And she was like, I thought I knew a lot about Italy, and I knew nothing. I mean, she's a highly educated woman, master's degree, like speaks Italian, like no big deal. But she's like, there's a lot more to it. And so travel helps. So values and beliefs, we talked about this a little bit last week with our guest speaker, and values and beliefs is like, it's a standard of what we say is good, right? We say in our country, you know, like a lot of people value like fast cars and nice cars, and you know, some people really value the electric car and all this kind of business. But listen, a car is a car. But we also maybe undervalue or don't value a car that's super old, super clunky, and like spewing out black smoke, right? So we value transportation, we value cars in our society, but maybe not ones that are all busted and polluting, right? So again, values and qualities, our values are qualities or beliefs that are viewed as desirable or important. Like college, for example, is it desirable and important? Yeah, absolutely. So again, oh, look at that, how sweet, they're holding hands. But see, we think it's sweet they're holding hands. That's very normal. That's very normal for men to hold hands in that country, right? I love that. So let's talk about this. What about a value? What value have you picked up from your childhood that you still value today? I'm asking the class, so I want to get at least 2 responses. What is a value you have as an adult that was fostered by your childhood?
Respect our elders.
Oh, yes, very good one, Elizabeth. Respect your elders. Now, most countries, that's very universal, respect your elders, but sometimes not so much. I mean, in American culture, we do that less, quite frankly. I think we undervalue our ancestors and our elders and things like that. But yes, so tell me about, like, how did you learn that?
My mom showed us that no matter if they're a stranger, if we see them on the street, you will always offer a polite greeting.
Yes,
And if they need help or are carrying something, you always offer to carry it for them wherever they go.
that's right.
And then respectfully, you know, return it once they get to wherever it is that they were going.
That's beautiful. I love that. I wish the American culture did that. I have taught my son to yeah, I mean, respect elders, yes, but it's hard. Again, with a mixed culture, sometimes it's hard to put in some cultural norms that would be normative for him, but not necessarily normative in the larger society. So I've taught him to open doors for everybody, not just a woman, a man too. I want him to learn that it is the smallest, kindest gesture you can do, opening a door, holding a door, right? And then he forgets to do it for me. Like, you held it for that person, and then they walked in, and then you walked in, and I hears me grabbing the door. He's like, what? You're just mom. I said, I'm an elder, and it is respectful. So now he does it he does it for me and for everybody. So again, I love how our culture really sets us up for our values and beliefs, but at the same time, sometimes people value and believe certain things in a culture that are not very friendly, not very. So if you believe, so like there was a thing in you know, when the football players were taking a knee during the national anthem, some people freaked out about that. You can't disrespect the national anthem. Well, yeah, you can. And so, but I'm telling you, some people that affected their career, affected their relationships. In fact, and when you're standing up for something, a value and belief that you have that might go against the norm, sometimes there are consequences, and it's really interesting. So a lot of times people kind of go with the flow until they start doing this reflection, this work, like that video talked about. And with that work and that, you say, I don't value that. I do value that. Or I value something different, or value something additional, right? So these are when they say do the work, this is doing the work. And that's what college is for. So really open up your eyes to see, like, are you doing things on autopilot just because somebody else taught you to believe that way? I was for a long time. As a young child, I was told to believe a certain way. And then when I started reading more, because I'm a good reader, it's like, oh, wait a minute, there's more worlds out there. There's more ways to look at this. And maybe this book that everybody is reading has been edited so many times. Do we know the true meaning? Or did somebody else put their biased words into that book a few versions ago? So it's really interesting that culture can be large, but it also could be a little bit smaller or on a microcosm. Next is norms. Oof, norms is fun because I tell people it's not just a restaurant. It's short for normative. So what is considered normal in our society? Well, our society, here's kind of a big blanket statement. It is normal to wake up in the morning and work through the day and then sleep at night. Now, some people don't do that because they have night jobs, but it's normative to have a job or go to school and things like that. How about watch for senior citizens like this, or don't drive so fast near a school, or stop at a crosswalk, or take the right of way at a 4-way stop. Those are norms, excuse me. But at the same time, some people don't value those things. So it's hard because norms are like what our cultural beliefs is normal. Like, for example, it's normal to drive on the right side of the road, right? That is our cultural norm. If somebody doesn't do that, it's unsafe. Oh, I can hear a hawk outside my door. I love hearing that. The juveniles are out right now, the ones that were born recently. Okay, so for example, money is highly valued in the United States, so monetary crimes are punished. Yeah. Yeah. Again. So any sort of like fraud, credit card fraud, stealing, anything like that, insider trading, punished, right? So same thing here. Driving well, less strictly enforced. Yeah, no, it's pretty strictly enforced. A DUI or DWI, it's against the law to drive drunk, but a lot of people get around it because there's not that many cops out. However, because of rideshare, there's less DUIs being caught. And so now the DUI fees are going up because paying those fees pays for a lot of things in the court system. So instead of it being about 10,000, it's about 20 now. What? It's not worth it. Okay, so formal norms, like the formal norms are like laws and things like that, but casual norms are like holding a door or saying bless you or get your elbows off the table or things like that. That is always interesting to me, the way people use utensils. And especially I'm seeing the white culture. I was taught a certain way to use utensils, and I still see a lot of like really stabby sort of like Neanderthal behaviors when it comes to food. My son likes to like lean over his food and put his hand on top of the fork and just like shovel it in. I was like, no. So again, it's normative for me to have decent table manners, but it's not always normative for everybody else, right? Look at that. Sometimes it's normal for women to raise the children, right? It used to be women didn't work. Women did all the work in the house with the children. Even my son said to me, boys do outside work and girls do inside work. I was like, no, not anymore, right? And that also came with women didn't have to have a job. Women have to have a job now, right? We can barely afford what we got here in Southern California. It's crazy, right? So you can watch this TED Talk here. It's very, very cool. And by the way, every time you hear the word weird, look it up. Look up what weird means. It's a great word. I love it. My son called me weird the other day. I was like, thank you. I like weird. Mores and folkways. We say this more, not mores, mores and folkways. So a more would be like, let's see. Oh, small talk. Folkways. Hi, how's it going? How you doing? How you been? Right? What to wear kind of situation. Look at in Canada, women can smile and say hello to men on the street. In Egypt, that is not acceptable. Of course. I try to say hello to everybody on campus. I feel like it's our little home. And I was doing that at Irvine. And there was this guy in a wheelchair, and I was like, hi, how's it going? He was like, he looked at me strange. You said hi to me? I was like, yeah, how's it going? It's like, fine. He was like suspicious. And then I thought, oh, maybe a lot of people don't say hi to him. It's really interesting. Many folkways are actions people take for granted. How about bless you when somebody sneezes? Right? Do you know where mores and folkways come from certain things? If we clink our glasses and say cheers, that came from somewhere. Saying God bless you or bless you came from somewhere. In my house, we say, if somebody coughs, we say cough you. If somebody sneezes, we say bless you. Right? So we just kind of like expanded the mores and folkways. And why? Because it's our family, because we can do that. Good. And the next, attitudes. Attitudes are really internalized standards, and then they lead to evaluations, or like how we carry ourselves and how we believe other people should carry themselves. So again, they're internalized standards, right? I have an internalized standard that adults are smarter because they've been on the planet longer and should be guides. Here I shoulded, We talked about that last week. Should be guides and mentors and examples for younger people who haven't been on the planet. Now, having that attitude as an internalized standard is not wrong, but it's not great because number one, I'm basing it on stuff that I learned. And number two, society's changing. So I can learn from a younger person. We did learn from Vygotsky here that we can learn the zone of proximal development can happen with an older person in the middle, not just a younger person in the middle. I can learn things from younger people. And so having this internalized standard doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work very well. And again, then I'll say things like, I hate it when parents or when I notice that other parents, they don't really parent. That's me having an attitude towards other people who are doing things differently than me. It's a bias, right? And a lot of people say, I love too much. I love church. I love it. Oh my God, I love it. You're like, but really, do you love it or you just really enjoy it? Right? And so again, so here's another piece here. For those of you who really remember 9/11, that was a really interesting time. I was working at Cal State Fullerton that day, and it was interesting. This massive change in the chrono system, again, was a big shared global event, not like COVID, but it really changed the attitude of Americans. That's when TSA was invented. We didn't have TSA before that. You didn't have to take your shoes off at the airport before that. So a lot of things, and also like vilifying the Middle East, like all these people, the Middle East is wrong, the Middle East is bad. It was a very small group of radical people, and didn't represent the entire people. But what it did is it made Americans paranoid. It was almost like trying to, like the Cold War type attitude. And so attitudes are evaluations. We say that person, oh, that person has dark skin, they're probably Middle Eastern, they're probably a terrorist. Oh, no, that jump in understanding is biased. But there was such a heightened intensity after 9/11 that people were just not using their rational mind. And so they would get a lot of like Homeland Security calls on like a neighbor or a delivery driver or a waiter or somebody making your coffee. That person's probably a terrorist. You're like, oh, I mean, TV shows changed. Think about the to solve a murder mystery. Those things change, like 48 hours, all those TV things, they all changed. It was wild. So again, this attitude and suspicion, it almost had to move back a generation. So like young people don't know 9/11 like older people do. And so we have times where older people than us had Vietnam and we don't know it like that, And so there's these different times that we have these different attitudes based on what we've experienced. But now we have COVID. Like 9/11 was understood around the world, but not the same as COVID. COVID, it was the first time that everybody shared a trauma, whether you admitted it or not. So it's a lot. Let's see. I do want to ask, every time we have a green part right here, I do want to ask, do you guys see any other attitudes or biases in the country? What are some attitudes and biases that are out there? Not just against Middle Eastern people. What about some other attitudes or biases? There's lots. I'll take it in the chat or verbally. Attitudes or biases. Anyone? Anyone? What about attitudes or biases against women? It's really interesting to think about that. We have had recently Roe v. Wade overturned. So that means that women can't make choices for their own bodies anymore. Oh, yes, Elizabeth, thank you. She says being scared of homeless people on the street. That's a big one. Homeless people, there's a lot of like bias against homeless people. And I always hear in interviews and the news and stuff, people are like, oh, these people just need to get a job. They just need to get off the street. If you haven't been homeless or worked in the homeless community, you don't know what they go through, because some of them want to have an apartment. They want to have a job, but they can't keep it together for some reason. And it could be mental illness. It could be drug use. It could just be they don't have the skills. They could just be fearful or paranoid, but there are definitely a lot of people who do get off the streets and they get programs and supports. It's hard because people tend to be scared. And you know what? Sometimes homeless people can be scary. There's been, incidents of, stabbings and things like that. But at the same time, they're just people. So it's hard because when people are doing, let's say we have a societal bias against people sleeping on the street or defecating on the street or, sleeping in your front yard and things like that. We have a bias against that. We have an expectation. We have a value. We have attitudes against that. But how do we change those things when some of those stories are true? Right. So that's a tough one. Yeah. Great point. Homelessness is a very, very tough social issue. Different countries handle that very, very differently. There are no homeless people in some of the Norwegian countries. None. They take them in. They take in immigrants from different countries. No homeless people. Like in Finland, none. Wow. Yep. So again, every human being holds thousands of attitudes. I have attitudes and biases. Again, I mentioned about drivers and things like that. I have an attitude that a loud tuner car is going to have a young person in it and driving fast and just wants attention with a loud car. I could be right. I could be wrong. What's the difference, right? Now, heritability of some attitudes, and Elizabeth brought this up earlier and said this was really kind of interesting. Again, when we normally talk about heritability of any trait, it's genetic, but this is not true. Okay. So like, for example, and again, organized religion, like some people really believe in this, means that mostly it has almost a half, if this was 50%, it would be percentage of heritability. The higher the number, the more you can inherit it through your environment. So let's see, what's a zero number here? Being assertive. Just because somebody else is assertive in your family doesn't mean that you're going to be. That could be the quality of an extrovert. Leadership, birth control, bingo. Think about this for a second. My mother, was born in the 40s and married in the 60s and had kids in the 60s, 70s, 80s. She's never used birth control ever. I had a relationship with birth control. Don't have to use it now, but I couldn't imagine that, like not having birth control. And some people go through their whole lives without using it. Some people use it years and years and years, right? Look at this, public speaking. That's very low in heritability, meaning if somebody in your family is good at public speaking, doesn't necessarily mean you will be. If somebody believes in, is good at playing chess or believes that chess is awesome, you have a 1/3 chance of it being inherited in your environment. Yeah. So reading, being a reader, a voracious reader, an avid reader, same thing. Big party smoking. Oh, this is interesting. Smoking is only 30% inherited. Interesting. My grandfather smoked and my father smoked and I smoked. And let's see, I think all of my siblings smoked, but for a short amount of time. And so that's really interesting. So now I know my son will never, because he doesn't see us do that. Like never. I mean, I want to say never because he might like it because his genetics are different. Interesting. Abortion on demand. I don't even know what that means. Abortion on demand. Oh, meaning abortion when you want it? Huh. Interesting. Like pro-choice. You have more than half a chance of being able to pro-choice. Yeah. When I told my son last night that, he said Roe versus Wade was overturned. I was like, yes, a while, like last year. He's like, what? He's like, is World War III coming? I was like, oh, buddy, but we just have to be safe and we have to make good choices and we have to not get in arguments with strangers and just be safe. It's because in this world, a woman is not as highly valued as a man. It's true, even though America's supposed to be free. And I said, you're mixed. And, we both have mental health quirks and things like that. There's people who are always going to think of you and me as less than. He's like, really? And I was like, yeah. It's almost like I had to finally sit and talk to him about like racism. Like we're kind of getting there. Because think about it. He's in a bubble where we accept him for who he is, what he looks like, what his heritage is, all his disabilities. He goes to school, same thing. Everybody loves him there, blah, blah, blah. But then you get out into the world and that's not actually true. You could have somebody calling you a racial slur to your face. I've been called plenty of names to my face out in the world. Right. But the point is that hopefully you can be secure in yourself to where that's a reflection of that person and not you. Right. So I like this one. look at this. Our attitudes are made up of cognitive thinking, emotional, and behavioral components, right? So when we think and feel and act a certain way, this shows us. So like, again, when you recycle, you feel happy about it. I have a 40 bushel composter. It's a barrel like this big times 2. So it's about this big. Do I recycle? You bet your butt I do. I love it because I also feel like there's plenty of things that I can't recycle. So it kind of balances out. I have a recycling bin right here. In terms of behavior, I'll do it. I'll spend time doing it. I actually, compost the food scraps. And I believe that recycling is important to do because our planet has finite resources. There's no planet B, right? And so again, a lot of people have these different attitudes and behaviors based on what they believe is yummy. I mean, yummy. What is good for them to do? That looks really yummy. My son's a great fruit eater. I'm more of a vegetable eater. And so that's one of those things where I'm like, okay, well, like you need to have a fruit and vegetable every day. And he's like, but I don't want any vegetables. I'm like, but I don't really need fruit. So we try to challenge each other and things like that. Some attitudes are stronger than others. Yes. I have big feelings about certain things. A lot of times people have like, oh yeah, that's great, but that's not for me. Some people are like, no, this is so like say for example, recycling. I'm a big recycler. I've helped set up gardens. I've taught people how to recycle and compost. I always teach people, well, you can do that with your scrap. You can do this with your scrap. So that is very, very important to me. And some people don't hold that as very, very important. Some people make attitudes stronger by what they've seen their family do, right? Or something that's really important that's happening right now. Again, attitude strength is determined by cognitive accessibility, meaning we believe in this attitude because we can pull that accessibility. We can believe that we can maybe give examples of things that we've been through that says that recycling is important. Okay. And when do attitudes guide our behaviors? Oof. Again, with recycling right here. When attitudes are strong, you do something about it. You think something about it. You feel something about it. When we have a strong intention to perform the behavior. Absolutely. Like, for example, like I have like a bucket for scraps and sometimes it stinks. And then my husband's like, and I'm like, okay, it's not important to him. It's important to me. So I'll put up with a couple of little stinky little flies before I, take it out. And he's like, no, take it out every day. I'm like, ugh. So again, I have a strong intention. And when I do it, it's not the same for him, right? When the attitude and the behavior both occur in so similar social situations. Again, I could be at somebody's house and be like, you could compost that. Doesn't mean they are going to, right? Because they don't have necessarily the same attitude or belief that I do. Let's see, for low self-monitors, low self-monitors, meaning people who monitor themselves, like low key versus high key. And attitudes only predict behaviors under certain conditions or for some people. So like, I would love to like, compost stuff like at a restaurant, but I can't do that. But I can get the coffee grounds from Starbucks. And yes, when I go to the beach, I grab a bag of seaweed, put that in my compost. I'm that lady who's grabbing seaweed off the beach. I am. Okay, there's a good case example here. And it talks about smoking. I'm not going to read it to you again. This one, it says, identify and bring to your mind a fruit. What is the best fruit? What fruit do you like the most? Let's ask the class. I can tell you what I had yesterday. What is your favorite fruit in the whole planet? You could eat it every day. Oh, let's see. I got one in the chat. Yes. Grapefruit. Yeah. I have not fallen in love with grapefruit my whole life, but now I do. Especially pink grapefruit. Wow. I could have that every day. It's beautiful. I had mango. Oh, so yummy. Just like a couple pieces. It's so yummy. Don't always get that. Who else in the chat? Peaches. Yuri. Nice. Oh yeah. Peaches are the best, especially in the summer. Just like for some reason, like a peach, if you had a fully ripened out of season peach, it's not the same. But you have it in the summer and it's like a warm, or like peach tea, or like just eating a peach. Oh yeah, those are the best. Oh my gosh. So good. Right. So again, this tells you right here, you have previous experiences with other fruit. Maybe the first time you had it was amazing. Oh, Samantha said pineapple. Yes. Oh, pineapple's the best. I just heard yesterday that Dole Whip is going to be available outside of Disney. Like, I don't know if it's going to be in stores or something, but yeah, they're making it available. I'm like, fantastic. So you could have previous experiences with that fruit. Like maybe you remember the first time you had it, you were on a vacation or you were with your grandparents gave it to you or something like that. And if it wasn't good, you wouldn't love it. So it must have been good, right? Availability of fruit in your geographic region. Just to let you know, there are places back east that literally only have fruit seasonally. We have such a long growing season here in Southern California. We get avocados ripe twice a year. I mean, we can put them in hothouses and whatnot. Strawberries twice a year. I mean, come on, it's unbelievable. And you can get a pineapple pretty much all year. These things are shipped in from all over the world, right? And if your parents didn't like fruit or vegetables, like how would you know? So I made a Tom Kha soup yesterday. It was like a Thai soup, like coconut milk and lemongrass and whatnot. And I put a lot of vegetables, carrots and snow peas and radishes and mushrooms. I just did this whole crazy thing. Put noodles with it this time. It has no dairy. It's like really good for you. And my son's like, well, did you put mushrooms in there? I was like, no, I kept those on the side because I know you don't like them. And then he goes, well, what kind of noodles are there? I'm like, well, they're Thai, like wheat. They're like more like udon noodles. I don't want those. Okay. So my preferences aren't necessarily his preferences and things like that. And so again, we share so many things, attitudes and behaviors. Look at all those references, attitudes and behaviors based on our bubble, based on our family, based on what we're exposed to, what our society has norms of, and then what we personally value and believe, and then our dominant culture. So I look at it like Bronfenbrenner talks about the dominant culture, the macro system. And then we talk more about values and beliefs that come from a microsystem. Norms are from the macro system, from the society. And then attitudes are more based on your bubble, like your friends and what you grab from your friends and your family and things like that. Even churches and social groups and things like that. So lots of stuff here, lots of stuff, culture and socialization. So I am going to stop the recording right now. I don't know if I even recorded that. Oh, yes, I did. Yay.